All right, this is Kristin Catherwood, Director of Living Heritage with Heritage Saskatchewan, and I'm here today with my good friend Joey Donnelly, coming to us from Swift Current, the Newcomer Welcome Center on Treaty 4 territory. So Joey, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like your background and yeah, like how you ended up being part of this project, COVID-19 Culture Project?
Hi, Kristin, and thanks for having me and be part of this amazing project. I was born in Herbert, just about 40 there,
Oh,
and eventually up with you in St. John's, Newfoundland, studying folklore. So my background is in literature and folklore, and it's a privilege to hear stories, and especially during these really trying times. I think this project, for myself, revealed a lot of different aspects about what people are dealing with, and how they're overcoming some of the challenges as well.
awesome. So I think, unfortunately, Joey, my internet connection
No worries.
had a little bit to start. So you were born in Herbert, born and raised,
Oh yeah.
Southwest Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Yeah, I was born in Herbert, raised in Southwest Saskatchewan. I attended university in Ottawa, Montreal, and eventually St. John's, where I met you, Kristin, studying folklore. So, like you, I'm really interested in oral history narratives and the traditions that are behind people's stories. And so this project, I think, really uncovered a lot about what people are thinking about during the pandemic, how they're overcoming some of the challenges and still struggling to deal with the future in front of them. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into your interviews more, so I guess, so right now you're working at the Southwest Newcomer Welcome Center, right? In Swift Current. And what's your job title there?
Yeah, I'm the community connections worker at the Welcome Center. I've been here for just over 4 years. I just recently started this particular position. Before that, I was the person at the front desk helping newcomers as they come into the country. And so, yeah, we help immigrants and refugees settle in the Southwest region. And yeah, it's a privilege to work here because you do really get to meet so many people from so many different corners of the globe.
Yeah. And just to continue to plug you a little bit, you've also worked as a journalist in both print and radio. You were founding board director for the Lyric Theater in Swift Current and continue to be involved, as well as you're an actor, an activist as well, and you're just really really embedded in your community and you know it so well. And so I knew that you were just an ideal person for us to work with, to gather some of these stories about what life has been like during COVID-19 in 2020 in Saskatchewan. And I was really thrilled with the diversity of backgrounds of people who you chose to interview. So could you just share with us who you interviewed and sort of how you went about deciding who you wanted, whose perspective you wanted to invite to be part of this project?
Sure. Many of the people I spoke with have contacts or connections with the Welcome Center, but that wasn't really the only criteria for selecting the people who I spoke with. They ended up being all women, covering a different range of perspectives and experiences. So perhaps we could start with Jane Ibisiki Tumunumbere. She's a friend of mine from Nigeria who works in a long-term care home for just a few residents at Southwest Homes here in Swift Current. And she came to Canada originally on a student visa and has been here for about 10 years. And so she's now still in the process of applying to be a permanent resident. And so she talks about the challenges, just given her status in Canada, but also as a Black woman during the pandemic, Of course, as this virus is occurring, a lot of people have been dealing or tackling issues to deal with race and the importance that Black Lives Matter and Indigenous lives matter. So Jane, I think, offered a really good perspective on that. Yeah, moving along, I also spoke with Star Andreas, who is also selection I presented because she's involved in the Regina protest recently to remove the John A. Macdonald statue and demonstrate to reflect and kind of change our perspective on what John A. Macdonald means in our culture. And she gives a really, like, I think, shattering interview of what it really means, at least for me, who grew up in a privileged, settler culture. I did grow up on a farm, and, having that Indigenous perspective, I think, for myself, really jolted, just different, different perspectives. And I hope people enjoy what she has to say as well. I also spoke to a coworker of mine, Dina Bahe. She is also dealing with a pandemic, and talked a bit about how she's coping with her family and also in her practice as a Christian. And I also spoke with Bula Ghosh, who is a decorated volunteer who works at Great Plains College and with the Saskatchewan Health Authority. And she talks about, a lot of issues about institutionalized racism to just the need to adapt in the workplace during the pandemic. And and then finally I spoke with Eliza Doyle. She talked about, her campaign to people to wear masks, through also her experience as a musician during the pandemic, and some of the issues that she's had to deal with that as well. So, and then I have another upcoming interview with Marianne Kirkby, who will discuss, from her Hutterite perspective during the pandemic. Of course, Marianne left the colony when she was a child, but she continues to have strong ties with the Hutterite community. So I thought it important to include, that perspective as well. So, yeah, like a broad range of people. I could, of course, you could just keep going on, and I really look forward to hearing the stories of what my colleagues collected across the province as well. I think the collection will be really valuable for people to see how greatly our culture shifted during the pandemic. Like, personally, I've, witnessed, the hesitancy that, in people's eyes of, like, whether it's, crossing the street, unable to shake hands, or like being near your loved ones. We're all renegotiating our humanity, and it can be really trying. So, of course, I think you agree with me, Kristin, that telling stories is a great way to overcome these challenges and see light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, thanks. Really well said, Joey. That's a really great way of putting it, renegotiating our humanity. Even just before this, the recording, we were just chatting a little bit about our own lives right now, and just some of the issues that come up just even within families, and figuring out how to even talk about some of these issues, even within your close family, So on that note of how it is affecting us personally, I did want to ask you a couple questions, which you asked your participants. So first of all, how has this pandemic affected you personally, Joey? How has it impacted or changed your life, or has it?
Yeah, it definitely has. I don't think you can escape the effects of the pandemic. Personally, with my family, we talked about the importance to think about not just your health, but the impact of your actions upon others. Some people have talked about, during the AIDS crisis, that people were the gay men always had to negotiate a level of danger in order to just live a full life, right? But like now everybody has to do that on like even a grander scale, just because it's like, it's not sex, it's like our daily interactions. It's taking the consideration that perhaps we're not dealing with airdrops but aerosols when it comes to the transmission of the virus. And we look at our province's reaction. It prided itself to be, the first to reopen across the country. But today there were over 30 cases in the south. There have been advisories hospital in Swift Current because of cases all around the region. And there have also been instances of outbreaks on 2 colonies near Maple Creek. And yeah, just the ramification of that too, culturally, and how people approach different cultures. I talked about that with different people. With Dina, I talked about some of the prejudice that Asian people are facing during the pandemic, and of course, as mentioned, I addressed the issues of the Black Lives Matter protesters too, with different respondents as well. So yeah, it's been really challenging, just to see like where we all fit into this. So for myself, like, I guess I've been like, at first I was working a lot from home, and that was really my priority. And I think like a lot of people, we were trying to listen to these stay-at-home orders, but then there was this fatigue combined with like a mix of different messages from various jurisdictions, whether it was municipal, provincial, federal. We hear all of these different guidelines, and hindsight is 2020, but of course we should have been wearing masks earlier on during the pandemic, and we're seeing the consequences of that right now. And there's a story that I could share with you regarding my sister. She went into a Dollarama here in town, and there was a man who just stood outside there without a mask, who accosted my sister wearing a mask, and harassed her and asked her, "Why are you wearing a mask? Do you really think that's going to be safe?" And when she left the store, he harassed her again. So there's no doubt that right-wing populism is also exacerbating our public health response to this pandemic. And I think a theme running through a lot of the interviews discusses the social angst that we're experiencing, that that's particularly noted in Saskatchewan. We are among the province that has the greatest rates of discrimination, whether it's towards immigrants or people of color or gay people, or this Canadian Nationalist Party too that emerged in Saskatchewan. They were in the news again today, and their rants against Jews. So there, I think there is an underbelly to some of what we're experiencing as well that's getting exacerbated. So I fear that unless we really are kind to each other, we could be sliding down to like dark paths, or at least those are my concerns, and we can only do our daily work and try to make Saskatchewan a better place. And I think these narratives do actually bridge a lot of hope, but some of the prejudice that's out there definitely should be noted.
Yeah, I think the points you're raising, it's interesting to consider that right now we don't know where this ends or how long, or and we can look to history for examples of what's happened in other times when there's been an upheaval like this, which it is an upheaval, and we don't know how dramatic that will actually be, but it's definitely something that, you're right, as we go day by day, we sort of have to go on with our daily lives. But meanwhile, we know that there are shifts occurring at a global level, and at local levels there's tensions, there's difficulty in understanding exactly what's going on because of conflicting information and the rise of social media and how that impacts us both kind of locally in our immediate families and immediate communities, but also allows us access to kind of global conversations. So there's just a lot going on right now, and it's hard to make sense of. And so, I mean, this project right now is an attempt to capture kind of like where are people at in Saskatchewan right now in June, July 2020, where, you know, some of the early kind of shock of the pandemic has worn off, and yet we're still living in the midst of it, and we're not really sure what's on the other side. And so on that note, what surprised you the most out of, you know, was there a theme in the interviews? Was there something that came up that sort of surprised you where you went, like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that, or that's really interesting?
Well, I think I referenced it before, but the moment that I was like floored was when I asked Star Andreas, like, why are you calling for the removal of this statue during the pandemic? And then she went on to describe um, oral history narratives that were passed through her family, you know, of policies that the prime minister had pushed and enacted, and yeah, it brought me to tears. So like for me, I think like what's happening for a lot of people, there is like a, you know, cultural shift and understanding that this is also an important time to shift our narratives in regards to Indigenous peoples in Canada, but also Black lives in Canada and beyond, that we really tackle systemic racism within our justice system and our politics. So I think for me, like that was like, yeah, hearing some of those firsthand accounts like are really big. But I guess there's other times too, is just sometimes it's just like the calmness and like determination of some folks too, that it's just, you know, I get really agitated of all these changes, but yeah, like someone like Dina or Jane, you know, they just kind of going with it, and you know, they're not that upset. There's just something that we have to deal with, and we're gonna get there too. So I guess it's like it's a good reminder not to like to look too much into the void, because there's certainly a lot of unknowns. But yeah, there's also just a way that we can approach this pandemic as well, which is like based in calmness and like determination and yeah, and collectivity, because I think we are also witnessing like a great pressure on our whole system, like our economic system, our environment. Global warming is occurring at unprecedented levels. We had a drought in the province, and then we all of a sudden got rain. So people say, "Oh, that's Saskatchewan weather," but we're still, you know, there's still a lot of issues at play, and you know, I hope, yeah, we can deal with this particular issue as a society, but we can also think about how this interrelates to, you know, issues like climate change, because they are related too, and we're seeing a lot of strain put on our democracy. So I hope, yeah, we can approach it with that calmness, but I really appreciate too the activist voice, you know, of the Indigenous warrior for whom I spoke with, because I think without that call to action, you know, we're just doomed to repeat the same oppressive structures, mistakes, you know, like, yeah, like you were talking about the history of previous pandemics like 1918, you know, like there was a lot of people who just didn't take it seriously. But within my family, there are stories of entire families that were wiped out during that time, you know, and there's a graveyard just down the road from my farm that's filled with people, and there are unmarked graves. There's only one grave that you can actually see and make out right now, but all of them are just these like sunken little bits all through the grassland. So yeah, it's humbling to think about when you realize how quickly this can spread. That yeah, especially in the Southwest, this is a particularly scary week, and if you look back to the worst cases from 1918, it was in October and November. So there is this dread of a second wave or what's to come, you know, and I think we have to be extra resilient, you know, obviously listen to our public health authorities, but also look at them with some degree of skepticism as well, because there's been a real politicization of this pandemic, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, the informants, I think, talk about a lot of these topics, so I hope you are listening to them.
Oh, I think you cut out there a little bit, Joey.
Oh yeah, I was just saying the informants, they talk a lot about these various topics, and I hope you enjoy listening to them.
Yeah, well, it's adds such a, I mean, across the board, in all the interviews that I've listened to across the province that we've gathered so far, it's just there's some common threads of just kind of the surprise of something like this happening, and how it's brought people close to sort of their priorities and what really matters to them. And I do think we're seeing this on an individual level, but also, as you say, on a societal level. And so I really appreciate that you sought out people with these strong voices who are speaking for issues larger than themselves and larger than their own kind of personal safety at this time, and saying, like, we need change, and change is upon us, and how can we use change to better our future. And that's a really inspiring message. And yeah, we will see how these things move forward as we go forward. Right now it's July 2020. In a few months there may be very different things to be talking about. But I just want to thank you so much, Joey, for being part of this project and for your incredible work that you do in your daily life, but also for part of this project and reaching out and bringing in these really diverse voices to this project. It's really humbling for me to listen to them and to hear you speak, and also to know that these voices will be on the historical record. That makes me really proud of the work we're doing at Heritage Saskatchewan to make sure that, you know, when this is history and people are looking back on it, that they're going to be able to access many different voices that historically may not have been available. So that makes me really happy that that's part of this project. So thank you so much for that. And I'll end the recording now. Thanks so much, Joey.
Thanks, Kristin.